approaching future that is the singularity. You know, the moment in human evolution where we finally cross the organic threshold and become one with our digital creations. That beautiful shining moment in the future that approaches us, you know, every day it comes a little closer. Our technology and our ambitions take us a step further towards that beautiful, shining, instantaneous goal. The problem with all of that is that some of us have to go first, right? When it comes to the intermingling with our technology, the intertwining, the combining, and finally entering into a new future as a new and other type of thing, an android, if you will. Again, the issue is some of us have to go first. Some of us have to become digital sooner than others. So we can try those things out, right? So that we can embrace the digital of it, the technology of it, and, you know, potentially make sure we still have our humanity in check, right? To be a guinea pig, to be a test case, to be an explorer. And you can rest easy, dear listener. You can relax. Because if all of this sounds terrifying and you're not ready to enter into our digital utopian future, you can relax. As I say, you can chill. You can take a sit back because I did that for you. I know you just come here for the podcast. I know you just enjoy listening to my rambles, okay? But I'm here to tell you that I actually am saving the human race and helping us move into this glorious binary future. Immediately realizing the irony of that, tune into my other episode about the issues with binary. But, you know, let's stay within this extended description of the singularity and our oncoming androidity. You know, the possibility of becoming more integrated with circuit boards over time, and my part to play in all that. You know, it's humble, or I try to approach it with humbleness, humility, one of those. But I've taken on this task, and I'm here today to talk about it and tell you about my struggles. And maybe you don't even know this about me. Maybe you didn't know that I was saving the world. Maybe you didn't even know that I was an android this whole time. But if you can believe me, it's true, and the evidence is right here on my arm. Now, if you are a audio-only listener, you won't see the visual cue I'm providing. I'm just raising my arm to camera and showing off a little white disc just at the back of the arm there. Maybe you've seen it before, if you have ever watched a video. Maybe you've seen one of them in the wild, perhaps even. But if you've seen it on me or out there, maybe you've assumed it was something like a nicotine patch. That's kind of the size we're talking here. It's just right on the back there. Seems fairly innocuous, right? Again, it is the beginning of the future happening right here. What I'm wearing on my arm is not a nicotine patch. Thankfully, I've never had issues, smoking or not smoking. What it is a blood glucose monitor. And I am the first in my family to wear one of these. Maybe I'm the first person you know to wear one of these. And therefore, I rightly claim my title as the first android among us. Because this little device is on me. It is in me, consensually, and it is constantly taking a digital reading of my analog existence. And, you may have sometimes thought that you have a somewhat dependent or somewhat, you find yourself attached to your phone. Let's put it that way. Let me tell you, I am literally attached to it. There's a sensor at the top of my phone, perhaps it is also at the top of yours, that can read the data that is coming out of this small glucose monitor attached to my arm. And with these talking technologies and with this, little patch situation we've got going on here, I can now monitor my blood glucose. That is the level of glucose in my bloodstream at any time, at any moment. And in fact, I can see what it was doing for the last 8 hours if I'm only just to tap it once. So that means I can tap it more than every 8 hours and get an even more detailed picture and maybe improve and correct the data over time. Now, why the heck would I do this? Well, I've told you about my lofty goals and my aspirations for bringing us into a cyborg-populated future, moving us beyond the shackles of our mortal and organic existence. But also, one could even argue the main reason is that I'm diabetic. I've been diabetic for, I guess one could argue my whole life. But I received my diagnosis at age 11. And let me tell you, we didn't have this kind of awesome technology back in the day. And so at the beginning, I was, and many diabetics still are, testing their blood sugar with their blood, very literally. They were pricking their finger. I wonder if that's how you would describe it here in Canada, but certainly I was always discussing pricking my fingers. Get some blood out of there, right out of the fingertip. Well, you mustn't do the fingertip. That's the rule they teach you. Get the corner. If you can imagine the corner of your finger, if you square it off, right? That's where you're supposed to be. And there's this little device and it shoots, I guess, a needle, but it's not hollow, into you for a millisecond. And of course, that's enough to draw blood up from your fingertip. You put that on a little device. It tells you in 5 or 10 seconds how much glucose is in your blood. And then you, as a diabetic, assess. You move forward. You either eat something or you take some insulin. Too hard to remember the word insulin there for someone who's had diabetes for over 21 years. But those are your options. Or I suppose the third option is do fuck all. Live with whatever number comes up. And, interpreting that number is the main skill that you learn. So you take the blood, you do the thing, you get an accurate reading, and then you're going to have the know-how and the skills and the sort of wisdom to know what to do next. And the problem was, when this was first introduced, at least to me, was that it's just not enough to go on. If you've got 3 meals and 1 bedtime, those are sort of the 4 points of the day at which you would be testing your blood. Because you'd probably do it before you want to eat and before you go to bed, so that you can take some insulin or eat or do nothing, as discussed, and crack on about your day. But it's not enough. There are 4 points in a 24-hour day is not enough to build up an accurate picture of what's going on. And that's the whole game with diabetes. Build up an accurate picture of what is occurring in your body as a response to the food that you eat and the lifestyle that you lead. And having been diabetic for a long time, I can tell you just that those things are not enough, because you think you know what you've eaten, but maybe you don't. because maybe the packaging's wrong, or maybe you are out to dinner and you just ordered off the menu and it doesn't have information about what's in the food. So you just have to kind of guess. And certainly when you're working with those 4 points of data in terms of the blood sugar, again, in that hours in between, you just have to guess. Or you can test constantly, and then, you run into supply issues. So when these continuous glucose monitors came along, it was revolutionary, right? Imagine going from 4 data points in a 24-hour period to infinite. I can see, mapped out as a delightful chart, exactly what's happening in my body at all times in terms of blood glucose. And I can, again, use my built-up wisdom of this time when I had less information to make an assessment. What's happening? What does this mean? What do these numbers mean? And what does it mean that it's up and down and so forth? And that's obviously amazing. And all it takes is ushering forward the singularity in the end of the human race as we know it. But we should stress the beginning of the next species and how exciting that is. Our android ancestors? Yeah, bloody hell. Why is that so difficult to work out? They'll be the ones who thank me, as well as myself in the short term. Because let me tell you, it is difficult to, when you have that limited amount of information, or indeed even now that I have this huge, accurate picture. Diabetes is still not an easy thing or a straightforward thing to manage. And sometimes I don't think about it, because after you've done something for 20 years, and when you've had such an upgrade as this, that you've become a whole different species, but also that you have changed the math, as they say, from 4 to infinite, you think that you'd be on top of it by now. You think that all of those things would add up to expertise. And the purpose of the expertise in this situation is to be able to manage and to some extent predict your blood glucose so that you can quote unquote live like a quote unquote normal person whose blood glucose, we must assume, is a perfectly flat line at all times. That's the goal of where we're trying to get to. Not just so that we can have a normal life and so that we can feel healthy in the moment, but also because there's these long-lasting ramifications of what might happen to your body if you mistreat it by letting your blood glucose run rampant and, peak and trough and high and low. But the issue is that almost anything can impact that. And I almost anything. I shittest thou not that many a time I have checked my blood sugar, done my tap with my phone, had them speak to one another, looked at the graph, and seen a crash on this chart of my blood sugar like it was, most of this year in the stock market. Just a dramatic and violent downturn. And the only thing that had changed, I went outside and it was a hot day. It really is. I mean, I'm not joking. There is a goal that one should be able to look at the plate of food that one is about to eat, assess the level of carbohydrate in that food on a gram basis, inject an appropriate amount of insulin separately to deal with that carbohydrate, and then see the results in your blood sugar that it stays flat because you took the right amount of insulin for the right amount of food and it's all good. But truly, when those things can be affected by the temperature of the sun and its impact upon your body, when those things can be affected by exercise that you did 2 days ago, when those things can be affected by your night's sleep, how much fat might be in the meal compared to carbohydrate, exactly when you eat that meal in your body's own circadian rhythm, in terms of, did you do too much insulin for the breakfast meal? Now, is the blood sugar still coming down? So would you do slightly less for the lunch meal? You're playing this, and it's one of these games where even with an infinite amount of data, it's still impossible to make safe, accurate, reasonable predictions and not be bamboozled. And just to add to the drama of that, once you think you've got it worked out and you're like, I think I know my metabolism after all, you age. And your metabolism changes once more. And mine has been through shifts and dramatic slides. And so even though we have all this information, and even though I can have these conversations, I have still ended up in doctors' offices where specialists have looked me in the eye. And all I've done for the past however many months is think about all of these things that I'm talking about, these numbers, these fats and carbohydrates and units of insulin and the glucose itself. All I've done is think about it. And I talk to my specialist and he says, have you even tried? One of them asked me, do you know how to assess what you're eating? Not anything more than specific than that. Just, hey man, have you got any idea what you're doing? And again, that's after not just the time since I saw them last, but more than 2 decades of concentrated effort. And that's all I think about. And that's obviously quite frustrating. And for a person who is anxious anyway, this is obviously a lot of thinking to add to the equation. And it is difficult for me, certainly looking back, knowing that 11 was, you're a kid, obviously. You still haven't formed all your ideas and all your habits and all your ways of doing things. And certainly not your full consciousness. And I wonder how much of the anxiety and the overthinking that I do and I experience today is because at such a crucial moment in my life, I was given a task that was all about overthinking, overanalyzing, stressing out in detail, with the stakes being my life, my corporeal existence, which, as we've said, we're excited about shedding going forward into the singularity. Praise be to the robots. But it again, when the stakes are that high, I remember talking to my nurse very early on, like first couple of weeks, and calling her and just being like, okay, I think I've got my head around this. Like, do the insulin, eat the food, test the blood, it's all good. She's like, have you got any questions for me? I said, yeah. Can I die from it? And she did a very, very good job of chilling me out from that precipice. But the problem is that she sort of gave me the worst answer possible. No, you can't. I mean, it would, like, there's obviously very extreme scenarios, and maybe I could do a whole nother episode on some very interesting ones that I've heard along the way of people being in very dangerous situations because of their diabetes and their sugar, for example, suddenly crashing. But generally no. Like, my life is not at an immediate or acute danger of ending. It's way worse. If you fuck this up, if you get these sugars wrong, if your blood glucose is this like roller coaster ride of peaks and troughs, then you sort of die slowly. I think there is a sort of urban legend around diabetics and amputation, but historically that was definitely true. And I would not be surprised if it were still true in very extreme cases. Again, people who've really let their care lapse. And you get a terrible impact on the tiny blood vessels, I want to say capillaries, and other, in the extremities. They always use the word extremities. So, your feet and your hand. And one of my favorite authors of all time, which again, I was reading at this formative period, 11 to 13, as I'm understanding myself, understanding my changing body, and then understanding my diabetes on top of that. I was also reading the wonderful Adrian Mole, which is just a stunning sort of faux diary about a teenage boy and his ridiculous teenageness. And, loving this book. I was interested in the author, who I found out is a woman named Sue Townsend. I didn't find that out, did I? It was right on the cover. So what am I talking about? But what I found out about her was that she was diabetic. And I thought, oh my God, what a wonderful connection we have here. I need to find this person. I need to reach out. We need to discuss two things. One, Adrian Mole, and how this sort of middle-aged woman managed to crawl inside my head, an adolescent boy, and so accurately depict my thoughts and experiences, but also the diabetic angle. And then I found out she was blind and had lost use of at least one hand. And all of those things had happened because she had spent essentially her life denying her diabetes, managing it extremely poorly as a result, not taking her insulin, not taking the blood glucose test, not wearing one of these boys, maybe they weren't even invented, and definitely not looking after herself, and as a result was losing extremities at a rate of knots. And that sticks with a young man, that kind of information stays with you. And so you try hard to avoid losing your eyesight. And again, it's extremely frustrating now that I have such a clear picture of what's going on inside my body. At least it was fine when I just had those 4 data points and I could just imagine that things were golden between breakfast and lunch and dinner. Everything was going well. Now I can see in glorious HD on my phone, which again is just attached to me at all times. I can check it any time and I can see that I'm doing badly. There's a chart, as I say, from 0 to whatever of what your blood glucose could be. And there's a nice green bar of where you want to be. I would imagine where you, dear listener, are right now. You're sitting in that green bar of a tolerable blood glucose level. I'm not. I'm above a lot. I'm below a little bit. I swing through the green bar in the middle a lot. But, I can't quite get it to land there. And again, 20 years of experience. 20 years of overthinking, 20 years of focusing on every detail, and ideally getting better and better and having more information and being more regular with my meals and being a bit more settled in life and knowing where my meals might come from. So approaching regularity. And still, I can go for a walk around the block and my sugar will just crash just like that. And I can take the same walk the next day, and because I thought it was going to crash, I'll have done something else to kind of prepare for that crash, and then the crash never comes, so now it's going high. And that's a daily fight, with those numbers. And then it's a 6 monthly visit to a specialist who again is like, is this your first day? And so what I find really interesting about all of those facts is that hopefully I've painted a picture for you that, diabetes isn't that much of a laugh. It's getting better all the time. it's getting easier all the time because of these extra tools, these more discreet and effective insulin pens, these more discreet and effective blood glucose monitors. It gets better. It doesn't get easy, but it gets easier. And so it's trending always. I mean, you want to feel like it's trending always in the right direction. But what I find really interesting is there's nothing appealing about it, right? Like, even though it could get as easy as, like, there's nothing appealing about it. But what I see on Instagram is this very sensor, this meter, which is, again, under my skin right now. And I have to replace it regularly. I have to switch arms with it. There's a bit of blood involved sometimes. And it's invasive, right? You can't be underwater for too long, all this kind of stuff. That will, again, affect our future Android brethren. And I now see these advertised on Instagram as just a health thing, right? Like, you would get a Fitbit, you get a Garmin, and then you get a blood glucose monitoring thing. And I think about how when people get really focused on this kind of health data, I just remember that being my first thought about the sort of digital revolution when it came to this kind of health data is like, why? Why are you inflicting that anxiety upon yourself? I remember someone who was really closely tracking their heart rate and was watching, why, when the heart rate would change, when it would rapidly go up and down. And they would look at the data and they would fret about the data and fret about, wow, why was my heart rate going up? I was sat at my desk, I was relaxing, I wasn't too stressed, what was going on? And that obviously, in that moment, sent their heart rate up again. And to me, that is the horrible trap that is to be avoided. And the very trap that I have not avoided and I'm in. I asked for more insight into my diabetes. I got it. It's horrible. So the idea that why would anybody who's not diabetic want to track their blood glucose? Number one, because are you planning to take insulin yourself? Maybe you're planning to change your diet. That's good. You do want to avoid spikes in general. But again, you guys have a nice working pancreas, I assume. So you are spiking a lot. Maybe you're, having some very sugary foods in your diet, but your body can also deal with it. So is it that much of a problem? And now you're using a sensor that I use only because I want to actually live a healthier and better life, but that's because I have no other choice, because I can't produce the insulin myself. So I need to have some insight into my blood glucose so that I can manually do that. Like I'm trapped in this system, and I'm being offered a tool to help me exist in this crazy world of confines. So the notion that you would put yourself in that influx of horrible data, potentially for no reason, potentially with no recourse if you don't like what you see. And again, it takes me back to my friend watching his heart rate and stressing out because he didn't do anything. He didn't go to a heart doctor. He didn't go to any other kind of specialist around stress or whatever. He just looked at the data and felt worse. So I could never understand what the approach was there, what was the desire to have that monitoring. But it's evident that it's a huge trend. And I appreciate, people keeping track of their steps or whatever. It's about having a goal of health. And maybe it is nice to track your heart rate if you're getting good response. You're like, oh, well, I'm seeing that I've been doing more exercise and now my heart rate is better. But the idea of simply, as I imagine would be the case with a blood glucose monitor on a non-diabetic person, the idea of having that data, not doing anything about it, or not being able to do anything about it, and again, having chosen to introduce that anxiety in your life, I'm not sure I understand. But what I do understand is that having this medical scientific data is potentially helpful for all of us, so that we can have a cross-spectrum look at what the hell our bodies are doing. So maybe it is beneficial to know what a normal person's glucose is doing all the time and compare it to my own. Maybe that's great. The only thing I can be certain of is that it helps us get one closer to being digital beings, being in that beautiful, technical, utopic future, and embracing our android selves as we enter into that wonderful future. So, save your applause, save your thanks. I do it clearly humbly, and I take on this challenge, and I'm very happy to be the first android in my family. Thanks for listening to the episode. What you may have noticed is that it's a very special episode. Didn't make too much fanfare about it. Just wanted to come in with my diabetic noise there. But this is our first episode when we're into the 20s. This is episode 20 itself. We have done 20 of these podcasts. I mean, I frankly find that unbelievable. I commend myself for sticking with it. I commend you for sticking with it as well. But what I've realized is, there's a thriving community out there. I've heard a lot of feedback from a lot of listeners, and it's all been private. It's all been offline, and that's not a good way to run this, right? We should be transparent about what the listeners feel, what they want, and that's going to help us just be a better podcast, right? So what I did was open up my inbox to some of our most dedicated listeners, and we're going to be doing an ongoing section where we take some of those best comments that were left with us. We take some of that best feedback, and we try to respond to it, and we try to make it a better show for everybody in general. So we're going to start off with a fun one, and if you are interested in letting me know how you feel about this show, please reach out to me, and we'll make that happen. We have a few in the tank, and we're going to start off with one right now. This message comes in from a day one listener, all the way from Italy, which is very exciting. So an international listener as well, which we always appreciate, spreading the algorithm in that way. It's just a short audio message here, so we'll see what this listener has to say.
My main feedback, as you know already, is that I really don't like the lounge chair. And especially I don't like when you're lying on the lounge chair and you make direct eye contact with the camera. It looks creepy.
Oh.
I don't mean that to sound as harsh as it does, but
it's pretty harsh.
Now that I've seen you sitting in a normal chair, I think you look normal. Even the eye contact with the camera doesn't seem so creepy. It's just something with a combination side eye from the chair and the lounging factor.
Right.
I think you should X that chair.
Wow. Tough to hear. That was, you used the word creepy a lot there, I feel like. So, tough to receive that kind of feedback. So vicious, straight to the bone there. Well, thanks. I hope you'll be glad to hear that I've got no choice. I've had to give up the chair, right? If you're a long-time listener, as this very feedbacker is, you'll know that I left that chair long behind in Rome. I can no longer lie back on my chair, but this is tough feedback to hear, because I thought that was the whole vibe of the podcast, was that I was in the therapist chair talking shit about myself, rambling. It's kind of a whole I'm in the therapist's office kind of vibe, right? That was what I was going for, at least. So, it's always disappointing to hear that the artist's intention and the artist's, interpretation are not necessarily one-to-one. I guess what she means by real chair is this. There's not a lot of sort of upper back support on this one. I can't lie down in this chair, and I think I spend far too much time sort of swinging back and forth, but I guess that's a joy, and apparently it's great. So I was hoping that this whole looking into camera thing was maybe the engaging part about watching the video, especially when I was, lying back on the chair. I was hoping that, I get to talk to myself, but every so often I, can drag you, the audience, into my little self bubble, give you a little Jim from the office, let you know that we're in on the same joke together. That was the energy I was hoping I was giving off. So yeah, to hear creepy that many times in one less than a minute message is pretty brutal feedback as it goes. So I'll try to be less creepy. Even as I do that, though, I am looking into the barrel of the camera. And now I guess I don't know where to look. So I guess I need more feedback is what I'm trying to say. If any of you guys feel differently, if you're down with the creep, if you don't agree that it is creepy, if you prefer the old chair, if you like the new chair, if you just wish I would stop swinging back and forth because that's what the chair does now, I need you to let me know. I need to see some comments. I need to see some emails. I need to see some Instagram comments. I need to see some more feedback in the form of a voice note so that we can continue this conversation. I'm not doing this podcast solo anymore, okay? This is a group experience now. We've got somebody else's voice. Soon we'll have yet another. This is a team now. We've got an organic group of people working on this thing now. So thank you, dear listener, for your feedback. I'll take the note. Be less creepy on camera. Be more vertical. That's what I'm hearing. I'll take it on board. I appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.